Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for the celebration we had last Sunday. Wow, thank you. It was so good. The cards, the notes, the text, the email, all of that. I just want to say thank you. Thank you. It is good to be here, and it is good to be with you. And so that's enough of that. Let's go. So the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about defining moments. And not just those. I mean, we can go in history books or get on the internet and do a little search about defining moments of history, things that change things, and inventions or discoveries. But I want to talk about defining moments in our individual spiritual lives. Things that have happened to us that was a moment in time when everything changed, when decisions were made. There was just something about the moment. You know it, you remember it, you felt it, you knew it was a defining moment, and everything changed for you. That maybe we as a people can become more and more aware of defining moments that are coming across and hit us to where we are ready for them. We're ready to tackle them. In Forbes magazine, I know this is not necessarily a Christian periodical or anything, but Sydney Evans, this is an article she wrote about defining moments, and this was a quote she had when she described what a defining moment is. She said, a defining moment is a point in your life when you're urged to make a pivotal decision or when you experience something that fundamentally changes you. Not only do these moments define us, but they have transformative effect on our perceptions and behavior. And I thought that was a great way to say what a defining moment is. And that's what we're going to tackle the next 3 Sundays, and we're doing this. Also, one of the things, I've got some friends that are going to be helping me out the next 3 Sundays. They're going to come up and we'll talk about a defining moment in their spiritual journey just to share as we get ready to break into this. So today, I've asked Morgan Hummerkauser. She's our middle school pastor. She's extremely shy, and it's hard for her to be up in front, so you may have to welcome her. But I'm going to ask Morgan to just share with us. Yeah.
Hi. Sean told me to keep it short, and I managed to do that first service, but I remembered some things that I forgot. No, I'm just kidding. But I grew up in a Christian family. I had huge Christian influences in my life. I basically grew up at the church. My grandmother was the secretary there, my grandfather the custodian, and so I was there all the time. Huge attender of my youth group. I just loved church. I truly did. And so when I went on a youth event called Extravaganza at Southern Nazarene University, there came a moment where something happened to me that it was unexpected, to say the least. The speaker there came to the end of his message, and he was like, if there's anyone here who feels called into ministry, I want you to stand up. And in that moment, I felt this tugging at my heart and this voice saying, you need to stand up. I'm calling you. You need to stand up. I want you to be a youth pastor. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know what was happening. I was like, is this my head? Am I speaking to myself? Or is this from God? And so because of that confusion, I was like, I'm just going to sit in my seat. I'm not going to stand up. I'm unsure. But then after the event, I met with my youth pastor, and I was like, hey, man, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I think God is telling me. And he immediately goes, I absolutely affirm you. If you want affirmation, here it is. I think I've been waiting for this conversation to happen. Yes, go into youth ministry. That was a call from God. And you would think that in that moment, that would be my defining moment, right then and there. That I would go home and be like, yes, I'm going to be a youth pastor. But when I got home, I started thinking, well, what does that all entail? I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of money. He's probably going to ask me to leave my family and go somewhere that I do not know. And that whole idea just scared me half to death. And besides the fact, I already knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an engineer. And so that's what I was like, God, we're going to make a compromise, because that's what you do, when God's calling you to a scary thing. Let's compromise. Okay, I'm going to go to Texas Tech University, and I'm going to be an engineer, but on the side, I'm going to be the best youth volunteer you've ever seen. Okay, it was like, I'm going to do that for you, God. But all the while, as I continue to go to college, as I study my general education courses, I hear this whisper going, you're running away from me, you're running away from me. I have called you. I have called you. And so it got to my junior year, and I go, and I'm about to start all my engineering courses. Like, general education is out of the way, engineering full force ahead. And I go first day of class to check my schedule, and I look at my schedule, and it is completely blank. And I'm like, whoa, okay, there's just a screw up, IT problem. Okay, so I call my advisor, and I'm like, hey, I don't see any of my classes listed on here. What's going on? She goes, Morgan, you have failed to pay your last registration payment. And so you have been dropped from all your courses. And I'm like, okay, well, I can pay that. Well, how do I get back into my courses? She goes, it looks like I can only get you into one, and that's your only general education course of fine arts. It was like a slap in the face, God saying, you're not ignoring me anymore. I am calling you. And in that moment, I went home, I got on my knees, and I'm going, God, I realize who you are. If you want all of me, you have all of me. I surrendered to him 100%, went downstairs, got online, applied to Olivet Nazarene University, and God has led me here since then.
Good job, Morgan. Well, I did have to admit something, first service, that I never really thought that she would be able to do it in a timely manner, so I didn't write anything else. And so thanks for coming. We call her Billy Graham sometimes. So she did a great job of sharing her story about the defining moment in her spiritual walk, and today we're going to look at the story of Esther. And if you have your Bibles, you can open them up. We're going to be kind of going through about the first 7 chapters fairly quickly. The verses will be on the screen. If you follow around in the YouVersion app at the live event, you can see that there. But a little history to get us ready to understand where we're at with Esther. It was about 480 BC, and there was a massive Persian army was marching towards Athens, Greece. And the ancient sources say that the number of that in the army was about 1 million soldiers. And Persia is putting a massive military display on for the whole world to hear about and to know what was happening. The Persian Empire basically stretched from Libya and Africa all the way to Pakistan and the borders of Asia. It was the largest geographical empire in the history of the world. It was the second great empire after the Babylonian Empire, which was conquered in 539 BC. Now, you may remember this spring we studied the story of Daniel and what was taking place in the exile, and some of this may sound a little familiar. The Persians ruled for roughly 200 years, and they were replaced by the Greeks, who were eventually replaced by the Romans. And King Darius, who ruled the Persian Empire at the time, was defeated by the Greeks at Marathon. And enraged Darius was determined to destroy his Greek enemies. And before the battle could take place, Darius passes away unexpectedly. His son, who would become ruler, who would inherit the quest of destroying the Greeks, is a man by the name of Xerxes. And Xerxes has been famous. Many of you who have studied world history, you know who Xerxes is. He was in the Bible as well. And he lives from 519 to 486 BC, and he really comes to power in 486. And the first order of business that he has to deal with is he has an uprising in Egypt that he has got to take care of before he can go and honor his father by annihilating the Greeks. And he goes to Egypt, and it takes about 5 years for him to get ready to roll as he tees that up and heads off to Athens, Greece. Now, Xerxes is in these several little battles and not full-on wars, but skirmishes that take place. Eventually, Persia will be defeated by the Greeks, by a leader named Alexander the Great. So what does all of that have to do with Esther? Well, in the very first book, the very first chapter of Esther, the king is named Xerxes. And the story that will come about is of Esther, but the story about Xerxes and his power, his control. And there are these scriptural accounts of who he is. But the heart of the matter for us to understand and maybe take away is how the story of Esther is really about the story of one woman, through the providence of God, saved the Jews from genocide. How did one woman at this moment in time, through the providence of God, save a whole nation from genocide. So as we dig into this actual book, we're going to be skimming some sections and coming through, but I want to make sure you kind of follow along in Esther, this book. So here we go. So describing Xerxes in chapter 1 is the king, largest group ever, largest geographical territory, just kingdom, was massive. He was the son of Darius, which means he was the grandson of Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus the Great was the Persian ruler who decreed that the Jews could go back to their land after Nebuchadnezzar had taken them hostage and brought them out of exile for 70 years, and this is where we're at now. So this is a long story that takes you to this moment in time. Now, many of the Jews, when they were freed and ready to go home, they did not necessarily go back to Jerusalem. There were some that went, but many had already settled and were scattered all through the Persian Empire. They were making it home. Now, Xerxes is like many rulers. They struggle with authority and power and control. In chapter 1, if you went back and read that, you would know that he has dethroned his queen, Vashti, as he has had this unbelievable party going on, and he asked for her to come out so he can show her off to nobles and other leaders. And she says, no, I'm not coming. I'm not coming out. And this disobedience could have actually gotten her killed, could have had her executed. But what he has said to do is he dethroned her. He took away her crown and sent her away. So not only is he in these skirmishes that he is not winning in Greece, he's not attacking, he's not honoring his father the way he wanted, now he has problems at home. His wife, his queen, has disobeyed him and not listening to him, so he's dethroned her. So to say he was a little cranky is probably an understatement. Xerxes is struggling. And all we really know about Esther we find in chapter 2, verse 7. You see it up on the screen. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadash, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her in as her own daughter, and when her father and mother had died. Now we get introduced to these two main people in this story in chapter 2, Mordecai and Esther. Now the Jewish people, they were cousins. There was a family history there. More than likely, they were descendants of the original Jewish captives that were taken by Nebuchadnezzar and into Babylon. And so they had never really been home. They'd never been to Jerusalem. And Esther was not her Jewish name. It was a name that was given to her as a Persian name. It was given to her kind of like, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they were given. They had their Jewish names, and then they were given Persian names. And so here we go as this time, and this moment is that they're looking for a queen, and they are gathering young, beautiful women from all over the kingdom to come before the king and to be chosen as a possible queen. And now, the estimate on the population of this vast geographical kingdom was somewhere around 50 million people. So if half are women, that means 25 million. So to barrel it down to one, that would be quite the task. Verse 12 out of chapter 2 says, before a young woman's turn to come into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women. 6 months with oil and myrrh, 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. You read that right. A year of pampering. A year of pampering. Now, women, can you imagine 3 days of pampering? Okay, can you imagine 3 hours of pampering and not, mom, hey, mom, hey, fix this, can you do this? Hey, mom, hey. Can you imagine a year of anything you wanted completely taken care of? That is absolutely amazing. But that's the story. That's what they were doing. They were getting all of these women ready for the selection process. And the person that was in charge had found favor, had just liked Esther. She stood out. Ultimately, Esther is chosen. She's chosen by Xerxes. Now, she had to somehow really make this impression out of hundreds of possibilities, from orphan, being raised by a cousin, to all of a sudden being the queen. This is the original. And she stole the king's heart. If you read all of those verses and chapters, that this is a woman that was basically an orphan. She was a part of an exiled people, a conquered people, and then all of a sudden she is now exalted to the highest position any woman in the entire world, entire Persia, she is exalted to. She is the queen. Now, here's what we got to take right here real quick, is this is not a coincidence. Things like this don't just happen. What we got to keep in mind is if you read the 10 chapters of Esther today, you will not see the word God in it. Nowhere in Scripture, nowhere in those 10 chapters does it mention his name. However, all through those 10 chapters, there is the working of God in the lives of the people. And so this is no coincidence. This is a providential movement of God in her life, orchestrating his own purposes through the afflictions and the affections of the emperor. And see, for whatever reason, Esther is told by Mordecai, the cousin, to keep it a secret about her ethnicity, that she's not supposed to share that she is of the Jewish descent. So not long after Esther is crowned, there's this all kinds of drama that takes place, assassinate Xerxes. And he sends word to Esther, and Esther is able to stop the murder. And so Mordecai is lifted up as basically a nobody to a noble, and he is brought into the palace area. And this next character that kind of comes into the story is a man named Haman. And he is elevated to a place of honor. He is at the top of the list. He has got Xerxes' ear. And all of the nobles are bowing down to him. They're basically offering worship to him because of his influence and power and authority that Haman has. And he is hungry for more power, more authority, and more control. And because Mordecai will not bow down to him, Haman hates him. Because he won't show the proper respect that Haman feels he deserves, Haman hates him. He hates Mordecai. And Mordecai is a follower of God and basically just says he refuses to worship anybody else. Verses 8 through 9 says this. Then Haman, I have chapter 3. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all the other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. Now, we said Haman is one of king's trusted advisors and decides to have all of the Jews in the kingdom murdered on a certain day. The decree will go out that all are to be executed. See, something funny happens here, that racism helps us justify madness. See, when we can find a way to dehumanize people, then we can justify hating them. And Haman, this was about control. And if Mordecai represented the Jewish population because of his God, then I have to hate you because you're eliminating more control for me. And the king agrees. And it's not because he hates the Jews or he even knows who the Jews are. His kingdom is so vast, he's conquered so many people, it doesn't really matter who they are. It's not that he dislikes them. Here's what kings want. They don't want threats. Kings don't like threats. And if somebody tells you that this is a potential threat in the kingdom, that they're not, and he's already had issues with disobedience with the queen, which everybody would have known. If Vashti's stand, that would have sent messages. Everybody in the kingdom would have known about Vashti. And by the time that it was passed down from village to village to city, by the time that story would have been crazy big, that Vashti went in with a shield and a sword and she knocked him down and took the crown, whatever. You know how stories go. You've shared them. So the stories would have been vast and big. So if you are a threat, we can't let you stand. It's got to go. And on top of it, Haman is so evil and he's so vile, he offers blood money for the execution. And Mordecai goes to Esther and he pleads on behalf of the people, on behalf of the Jewish nation. And so Esther is really caught in a rock and a hard spot, a really difficult situation. Because of the things that have happened with Vashti, you can't just show up into the king's presence. If he's not summoned you and you show up, it's death. And if you go in if she goes in as queen and says, oh, by the way, I'm Jewish, I know you just ordered all of them to be executed. He's got no problem getting rid of one queen. He's not going to have an issue getting rid of you either. So either way, she's writing her death sentence. And Xerxes was on thin patience for the queen as it is. Verse 12, when Esther's words were reported back to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. So she responds with the same, what do I do? I'm in a rock and a hard spot. And this is Mordecai's response. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. I mean, Mordecai totally understands and realizes the seriousness of the situation. And it would have been really easy for Esther. It would have been really easy for Esther to hide in the shadows of the comfort of the palace. I mean, worst case scenario, right? She just lies. She just doesn't do anything. She didn't acknowledge it. And she's like, Mordecai, who? Or are you Jewish? No. I mean, it's not like, there was the internet. They could search and take DNA samples, right? I mean, it's just words. She could have denied the whole thing. She could have just hid in the comfort of the palace. But he reminds her that she's dead either way. Somebody will find out. He pushes her and he tells her the Jewish nation will be taken care of. Don't worry about us. But what about you? What about you? And for such a time as this, that maybe you're at your position, perfectly orchestrated by a providential God to have you in this moment in history to define the moment for this young woman. This young woman had this all of a sudden from orphan to queen, and now all of a sudden she's got to make the hardest decision she's ever made in her life. That position isn't enough. Title alone won't clear it for us. Gifts, abilities, and talents, not enough. There's got to be a moment when we realize that this is a defining moment in our life. Verse 4, verses 15 through 16 says, Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, which was the capital, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So no matter your position or platform, no matter what, no matter where you're at, the comfort of the palace is not enough, that she's got to come forward, and she understands that prayer and fasting is critical to the coming moments of what she's got to do. Because see, platform and position don't elevate us high enough to have the courage to always do what we got to do. But prayer will give us the courage to tackle the things we have to tackle. I mean, to face the king could have meant death. No toleration. So our real comfort isn't in the platform, but it's in the prayer. And to be able to say with confidence, this is what I'll do. If I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. So she goes in, and the king accepts what she has to say, and you can read from verse 4 to chapter 7 later this afternoon. But this is kind of how it summarizes out as she goes before King Xerxes, and she makes her plea in verse 3. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If it had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, Who is he? Where is he, the man that has dared to do such a thing? And Esther said, An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman. Now, the kind of the wrap up there is Xerxes sends a new order, save all the Jews, disregard the old order. Mordecai is given Haman's estate and placed at the table. Haman is then executed in front of everybody. Esther is still beloved. The Jewish nation is saved, and it's a great old story in our Bibles. But how does this story apply to me? I mean, what does this have to do with my life? I mean, that's a great story, but how does this, I've never been pampered for a year. I've never, I've never been treated as royalty. I mean, I've never had everything I've ever wanted at my fingertips to where it just was delivered. I've never had to face choices like slavery or genocide. I mean, it's a great story, right? I mean, it's a great story. It kind of feels good. It's motivational, perhaps. And for such a time as this, that phrase, it's inspiring. It makes us want to do something. But the question is, how does it impact me now? What's the impact here? Are we using the platform that God has given us? And you may be thinking, I'm not a queen. I don't know. I don't have a platform. Well, that's not true. You do have a platform. You're living somewhere. There's an apartment, a house, a townhouse, a trailer, a fifth wheel. There's somewhere that you are staying. And wherever you're living, wherever that is, that's a platform. That's a platform with the people you're around, your family, your extended family. If you're thinking, you have no idea then, because I have nobody. I'm all alone. You're right. But you probably have neighbors. That's a platform. Or you have a job where you're out and you are about with people, and that's now a platform. Maybe you're the assistant to the manager, coach on your kids' travel, whatever. That's a platform. You're a grandparent that's going to watch those kids, and there are parents in the bleachers that are doing their best and trying to figure it out. And you, as the salty veteran, you now have a platform. You walk in here on Sunday morning and you shake a couple hands and you come to your seat. This is a platform and position that maybe, just maybe, God has orchestrated you providentially in your life for such a time as this, that God is whispering to you, I'm calling you out to do something. I'm calling you out to go. Maybe there's a defining moment in your life to where there's something you're supposed to do, because I believe with all that I'm here, that the busyness and hecticness of our days and schedules prevent us from having the time to pray and fast, to know that if I perish, I perish, because I'm going to step out and do what you've called me to do. I'm going to step out and go where you call me to go. I'm going to do what you've called me to do. I'm going to lead who you call me to lead, because that's what you're asking me to do. We get so wrapped up in the American dream that's taken us down paths that do not bring fulfillment. They don't bring it. You're going to turn around at some point in your life, you're going to say, I've wasted these days because there was such a time as this. There was a moment in time, a crossroads, where you had to come to a moment and you say, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll lead whoever you want me to lead, and I'll follow whoever you want me to follow. See, I just wonder as we live our life that there's this sovereign God that's providentially put you right here, right now, at this moment in time, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing.